She promised to test for hundreds of diseases using a single, tiny drop of blood. Investors believed her, and her company soared to a staggering $9 billion. She was called the next Steve Jobs, the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. But behind the magic machine hid one of history's most dangerous lies. The technology never worked, and real patients received terrifyingly false results. A wrong blood result can send a healthy person into needless panic or treatment. This is how $9 billion collapsed into absolute zero. Before we dive in, subscribe to the Fraud Report so you never miss a story. Our story begins in 2003 at Stanford University with a brilliant, intense young woman. Elizabeth Holmes was just 19 years old and burning with raw ambition. She came from an ambitious family that valued legacy, achievement, and worldly success deeply. She studied chemical engineering, but classrooms could never contain her enormous vision. Holmes had a deep, almost paralyzing fear of needles and blood draws. From that fear, she imagined a revolution in how the world tests blood. What if a single finger prick could replace painful, expensive laboratory draws? One tiny drop could screen for hundreds of conditions, she promised. She filed her first patent at 19, sketching a wearable drug patch device. It was a beautiful idea, the kind that changes the entire world. So at 19, Holmes dropped out of Stanford to chase it. Her professors warned that the science might not actually be possible. But Holmes had unshakable belief, and she refused to ever hear no. She took her tuition money and poured it into a new startup. She named it Theranos, blending the words therapy and diagnosis together. The name promised healing and certainty, two things her machine could never deliver. It was the year 2003 and Silicon Valley was hungry for disruption. Holmes idolized Steve Jobs with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She adopted his signature black turtleneck as her permanent daily uniform. She even lowered her voice to a deep, commanding baritone in meetings. Everything was carefully designed to project genius, authority, and total control. Colleagues recalled her piercing stare that rarely blinked during long, intense conversations. Her vision was a portable device that could sit in every home. She called the machine Edison, after the legendary American inventor. You'd prick your finger, insert a cartridge, and get instant results. No more giant labs, no more needles, no more painful waiting. She imagined the devices in homes, on battlefields, even aboard distant space missions. Investors were absolutely mesmerized by her confidence and her grand promises. By 2004, she had already raised nearly $6 million. The money kept flowing as her pitch became impossibly more ambitious. Early backers included her own family, friends, and wealthy Silicon Valley insiders. Holmes had a rare gift for making people believe the impossible. She spoke of saving lives, of a world where no disease hides. Venture capitalists wrote checks without ever seeing the science work. Many investors signed without ever receiving detailed financial statements or audited results. That single detail would later define the entire catastrophe. To silence doubters, Holmes assembled the most powerful board ever seen. Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State, joined her ranks. George Shultz, another legendary statesman, lent his enormous credibility. General James Mattis, the famed military commander, sat beside them. It was a wall of authority that almost no one dared to question. The famous board names became a shield against any serious technical scrutiny. But notice something strange about every single one of these famous names. Not one of them was an expert in medicine or blood diagnostics. They were powerful, impressive, and utterly unable to verify the science. And that, perhaps, was exactly the point all along. Real medical experts who joined briefly often left quietly, troubled by what they saw. The press fell hopelessly in love with Elizabeth Holmes. She graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Inc. magazine. Reporters compared her piercing blue eyes to a hypnotic, unblinking stare. She gave TED Talks and shared stages with presidents and billionaires. The myth of the visionary genius grew larger every single day. Cover stories rarely questioned the science, focusing instead on her dramatic origin tale. By 2010, Theranos was secretly negotiating with massive retail giants. They struck a landmark deal with the pharmacy chain Walgreens. Theranos wellness centers would appear inside stores across America. Ordinary customers could now walk in and get tested instantly. Customers trusted these centers with decisions about their families and their futures. Walgreens invested heavily, believing they backed the future of medicine. The grocery giant Safeway also signed a massive partnership deal. Safeway poured around $350 million into the dream. Everyone wanted a piece of this unstoppable medical revolution. Retail partners dreamed of a clinic in every neighborhood across the entire country. In 2014, Theranos hit a jaw-dropping $9 billion valuation. Holmes personally owned around half the company, making her a paper billionaire. She flew private jets and traveled with a constant security detail. At just 30, she was the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. Magazines crowned her a once-in-a-generation founder, reshaping the future of healthcare. From the outside, it looked like a flawless, unstoppable empire. But deep inside the laboratories, a terrifying secret was unraveling. The Edison machine, the heart of everything, simply did not work. A single drop of blood was never enough for accurate testing. A single droplet contains too few cells to reliably detect most serious diseases. The samples had to be diluted, ruining the reliability of results. The device produced wildly inconsistent and often dangerously wrong numbers. Engineers begged for more time, but Holmes refused to slow down. Some scientists quit in despair, convinced the core promise was physically impossible. The promises had already been made to the entire watching world. So Theranos made a desperate, deceptive, and reckless decision. They secretly ran patient samples on ordinary commercial machines built by Siemens, the very competitors they claimed to replace. Competitor machines were modified and hidden, contradicting every public claim Holmes made. The revolutionary blood technology was, in truth, a complete illusion. And when investors visited, the deception became a carefully staged theater. During demos, blood was drawn and placed into the Edison device, but the machine would secretly fail to produce any real result. So engineers pre-programmed fake results to appear on the screen. Visitors saw smooth, confident numbers and walked away completely convinced. Visitors never knew the confident numbers had been typed in long beforehand. Sometimes the sample was rushed away to a hidden back room. There, the real testing happened on the ordinary commercial machines. The entire spectacle was a magic trick dressed as medical science. The illusion required dozens of staff to stay silent about the staged shows. Inside the company, the culture became one of pure fear. Holmes ruled alongside her secret boyfriend, Ramesh Sunny Balwani. Balwani was the company president, feared throughout the entire building. Employees who asked too many questions were swiftly fired or threatened. Turnover was extreme, with talented scientists cycling out within months of joining. Departments were deliberately kept separated, so nobody saw the full picture. Secrecy wasn't just encouraged here, it was brutally enforced. Everyone signed extremely aggressive, non-disclosure agreements upon arrival. Lawyers from a top firm tracked and intimidated anyone who left. Former staff lived in genuine fear of lawsuits and surveillance. Some former employees described being followed and watched long after they resigned. It was an empire built entirely on silence and intimidation. But silence has limits, and some consciences refuse to stay quiet. Enter Erica Chung, a young scientist fresh out of Berkeley. She joined Theranos full of hope, dreaming of changing the world. Instead, she watched the machines fail quality control again and again. She saw faulty results being sent out to real, trusting patients. She quietly gathered evidence, knowing the danger of challenging a powerful company. Horrified, she realized people's actual health was being put at risk. Then there was Tyler Schultz, a name with enormous, dangerous weight. Tyler was the grandson of board member George Schultz himself. He believed in Holmes and joined Theranos with deep family pride. But he too discovered the manipulated data and the hidden failures. Tyler raised concerns directly, and the company turned on him instantly. Even his own grandfather sided with Holmes over his own blood. The rift split a respected family, pitting grandson against grandfather for years. Tyler faced relentless legal pressure that nearly destroyed his entire life. Yet both whistleblowers refused to let the deadly lie continue. Their courage would soon reach one determined investigative journalist. His name was John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal. He received a quiet tip that something was deeply wrong at Theranos. Carreyrou began digging, slowly piecing together the disturbing truth. He cross-checked every claim, building an airtight case from frightened anonymous sources. He spoke secretly with terrified former employees and their families. They described faked demos, broken machines, and silenced workers. The story he uncovered was almost too explosive to believe. When Theranos learned of the investigation, they fought back ferociously. Holmes hired the famous lawyer David Boies to crush the story. They threatened the journalist, the sources, and the newspaper itself. But Carrie Rue and the Journal refused to back down or surrender. The newspaper's editors backed their reporter despite enormous legal and financial pressure. On October 15, 2015, the bombshell article finally exploded. The headline revealed that Theranos struggled with its own blood technology. The world suddenly learned the miracle machine might be a fraud. Overnight, headlines around the globe questioned whether the miracle was pure fiction. Holmes appeared on television, calmly dismissing it all as lies. She called critics people who changed the world's worst enemies. For a moment, her charisma almost held the entire illusion together. But the truth, once released, could no longer be contained. Regulators stormed in to inspect the Theranos laboratories directly. What they found was a chamber of horrors and broken protocols. The agency found conditions that posed immediate danger to patient health. Inspectors documented unqualified staff running critical tests on patients' real samples. Theranos was forced to void tens of thousands of test results. Real patients had received false readings about serious medical conditions. Some were falsely told they had cancer or HIV markers. Others were dangerously reassured when they were actually gravely ill. This was no longer just fraud, it was a public health threat. Doctors began warning patients to retake every Theranos test at proper laboratories. Holmes was personally banned from operating a lab for 2 years. The once golden empire began crumbling at terrifying speed. Walgreens cut all ties and sued for its lost investment. Partners, investors, and patients scrambled away from the wreckage. Forbes revised Holmes's net worth from billions to absolutely nothing. From $4.5 billion to zero almost overnight. Investors who poured in fortunes were left holding worthless, unsellable company shares. Let's look at just how staggering that fall really was. In 2018, the financial regulator brought devastating fraud charges. The SEC accused Holmes of massive deception against her investors. She had raised over $700 million from believers. To settle, she paid a fine and surrendered company control. She was barred from leading any public company for a decade. Then in 2018, Theranos officially dissolved into total oblivion. The wellness centers vanished and the machines were locked away. 15 years of grand promises ended in complete and utter silence. Hundreds of employees lost their jobs as the once celebrated startup quietly shut down. But the financial settlement was only the very beginning. The Department of Justice pursued criminal fraud charges against her. Elizabeth Holmes now faced the very real prospect of prison. Her partner, Sunny Balwani, was charged separately for his role. The long-awaited trial finally began in the autumn of 2021. The world watched as the fallen icon walked into court. Prosecutors painted a clear picture of deliberate, calculated deception. They argued she knowingly lied to investors, partners, and patients. Whistleblowers Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz finally testified openly. Their courage, once silenced, now echoed through the courtroom. Jurors heard chilling testimony about altered reports and deliberately misleading investor pitches. The defense tried to shift the blame onto Sunny Balwani. Holmes claimed she was manipulated and abused within their relationship. She insisted she truly believed in the technology until the end. But the jury weighed the evidence over many tense days. On January 3, 2022, the verdict finally arrived. Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 4 counts of fraud. She was convicted of defrauding investors out of their fortunes. The visionary genius was now officially a convicted fraudster. Legal analysts called it one of the largest corporate fraud convictions in years. Months later, a judge delivered her sentence in November 2022. Holmes was sentenced to more than 11 years in prison. Specifically, 11 years and 3 months behind bars. She was also ordered to pay enormous restitution to her victims. Balwani received an even longer sentence for his own crimes. In 2023, Elizabeth Holmes reported to a Texas prison. The woman once worth billions now wore a simple prison uniform. Reporters gathered outside as the former billionaire disappeared behind prison walls. Let's compare the fortune she promised against where she ended up. So how did so many brilliant people believe such an enormous lie? Part of it was the seductive power of a perfect story. A young woman, a noble mission, a world-changing cure. Investors wanted it to be true so badly they ignored proof. They chased the fear of missing the next great revolution. And in Silicon Valley, faking it until you make it is celebrated. But you cannot fake your way through human blood and medicine. When software fails, an app simply crashes and reboots. When a blood test fails, a real human life is endangered. Patients deserve certainty, not a confident performance dressed up as proven science. That is the chilling line Elizabeth Holmes recklessly crossed. The whistleblowers proved that one brave voice can topple an empire. Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz risked everything for the truth. And John Carreyrou proved that journalism can still topple giants. Theranos remains a haunting warning carved into business history. Charisma is powerful, but charisma is not the same as truth. A confident voice can hide a completely empty machine. $9 billion vanished into nothing but a beautiful illusion. And countless patients still carry the trauma of false results. So here's the question that still lingers after everything. Did Elizabeth Holmes know she was lying from the very start? Or did she believe her own dream until it destroyed everyone? Tell us what you think down in the comments below. And subscribe to the Fraud Report for the next shocking story.